They took his house, they took his family, they took his pride. They left him with nothing but a broken body and a will that refused to die. And that was their biggest mistake. Once upon a time, Robert Hale was a respected man, not famous, not rich, but beyond mayor, but stable. He owned a modest construction business in a working class American town where everyone knew his name and trusted his handshake. People didn't call lawyers when they dealt with Robert, they called him. He built homes, fixed roofs, repaired churches, sponsored little league teams, and when people spoke of him, they said one simple thing: he's a good man. Robert's world was built on three pillars: his wife, Margaret, his son, Ethan, and the small white house on Cedar Street. Margaret was warm and practical, the kind of woman who kept everything running without ever asking for credit. Ethan was 16, tall, quiet, still figuring out who he was. Every Friday night, they ate dinner together at the same table. No phones, no television, just food, conversation, and laughter. Robert believed that as long as that table remained full, life could never truly break him. The trouble began quietly. A new corporation moved into town, bought old construction contracts, promised faster work and cheaper prices. At first, Robert wasn't worried. His reputation was stronger than any company logo. But slowly, jobs disappeared, contracts were cancelled, calls went unanswered. By the end of the year, half his crew was gone. Robert told himself it was temporary. He was wrong. To keep the company alive, Robert took a loan, then another, then a third, each one justified by hope. This next contract will save us. It never came. Margaret noticed the stress first: sleepless nights, silent dinners, stacks of unopened mail. "Talk to me," she said gently. Robert only replied, "I've got this." The foreclosure notice arrived on a Thursday, printed, cold, final. Robert stood on the porch staring at it while the sun went down. 30 years of work condensed into one piece of paper. Margaret read it silently. Then she sat down, and for the first time in their marriage, she cried for here. On the day they were forced out, the neighborhood gathered silently. No one knew what to say. Robert loaded the last box into a borrowed truck. Margaret locked the door from the final time. Ethan stood across the street pretending not to cry. The house that had held every birthday, every argument, every memory, now belonged to strangers. Robert placed his hand on the hood of the truck and whispered, "I am sorry." They moved into a small roadside motel. 2 beds, 1 bathroom, no kitchen. Margaret tried to keep it cheerful. Ethan grew distant. Robert searched for work every day. Nobody hired a broken construction worker with debt behind his eyes. Weeks turned into months. Hopes began to thin. One night, after another rejection, Margaret finally broke. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "We're sinking, Robert." He snapped back. "I'm trying," she said. "Try isn't feeding us." Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, hearing everything. Silence followed, heavy, unrepairable. 2 weeks later, Robert found temporary work unloading steel at a remote site. Exhausted, underpaid, dangerous conditions. On the third night, a cable snapped, steel shifted, and Robert was crushed beneath falling beams, his spine shattered. The man who once built homes could no longer stand. Margaret rushed to the hospital. Doctors spoke carefully. "He will never work construction again." The words landed like a death sentence. Medical bills arrived immediately. Debt multiplied, and with it, despair. Margaret tried to stay, tried to be strong, but the weight was unrelenting. One night, she packed a small suitcase, "I can't watch you fade away like this," she said softly. "It's killing me." Robert tried to reach for her, but he was trapped in a bed that did not move. She kissed his forehead, apologized, and walked out. Ethan went with her. When Robert was discharged, he went back to the motel alone. No family, no home, no purpose, only pain. He stared at the ceiling every night, thinking, "I have failed as a husband, I have failed as a father, I have failed as a man," and still some stubborn part of him refused to die. Robert sold his truck, his tools, his wedding ring. Each sale felt like craving pieces out of his identity. Former employees passed him on the street and pretended not to see him. Old friends stopped calling. Pride vanished quietly, and shame took its place. Eventually, the motel bill went unpaid. Robert was rolled out of the room in a wheelchair, his bags placed beside him on the sidewalk. Rain fell. Cars passed. Nobody stopped. He sat there for hours, soaked, hungry, homeless. The man who once built houses for others no longer had one himself. Late that night, soaked and shaken, Robert looked up at the black sky and whispered, "You can take everything from me, but you will not take my will." And for the first time since the accident, he did not feel defeated. Rock bottom is not a moment, it's a place where the world passes you without looking, and where a man must decide whether he is finished or beginning again. Robert Hale had reached that place. When the motel manager rolled him outside in his wheelchair and locked the door behind him, the world felt strangely distant. The rain had thinned to a cold drizzle. The streetlights buzzed. Traffic hissed along the wet pavement. Robert's heart fogged in the air as he sat on the sidewalk with a plastic bag of clothes tied to the back of his chair. His spine throbbed. His fingers were numb. He waited for someone to stop. No one did. A woman walked around him without slowing. A teenager laughed as he rode by. A man in a suit glanced once, then looked away. Robert whispered to himself, "Don't break, not tonight." But inside, he was splintering. By morning, the hunger had grown teeth. He pushed himself toward the edge of downtown. Each movement shot fire up in his back, but he endured it. He stopped at a diner window, staring at plates he couldn't afford anymore. Inside, a family laughed over pancakes, a father, a mother, a teenage son. For a few seconds, he imagined he was sitting with Margaret and Ethan again. Then the image dissolved. His stomach cramped. He turned away. Near the bus station, a man in a blue jacket walked up. "Spare change?" the man asked. Robert, exhausted, shook his head. "I don't have anything," he whispered. The man scoffed. "You're in a wheelchair and you're broke? Sucks to be you." Robert's jaw clenched. He looked down at his hands, once steady enough to raise walls, now trembling in his lap. Humiliation isn't loud, it's quiet, quiet enough to linger. Late afternoon, cool wind, no food, no destination. Robert pulled into the alley behind a bakery to rest. An elderly woman stepped outside, carrying a tray of day-old bread. She froze when she saw him. Their eyes met. For a moment, Robert braced for another insult, another look of fear, another reminder that he no longer belonged anywhere. Instead, she smiled gently. "You hungry?" Robert couldn't speak. He only nodded. She handed him 2 warm rolls wrapped in napkins. "No charge," she said. "Just take care of yourself." Robert stared at the bread like it was something holy. "Thank you," he whispered. The words cracked as they left his throat. It was the first time anyone had been kind to him in months. Days turned into a rhythm. He slept beneath an old highway overpass, the concrete rattling each time a truck passed overhead. He washed up in a gas station bathroom. He collected cans for recycling, earning just enough to buy a sandwich or a bottle of water. Some people ignored him, some mocked him, some pretended he was already dead. But Robert refused to disappear. Every morning he whispered the same sentence, "I am still here." The repetition was not for courage, it was for proof. One cold evening near a grocery store dumpster, Robert heard a voice he recognized, a voice that once shouted orders on construction sites. "Robert, is that you?" He turned. It was Daniel Ricks, a former employee, a man Robert had trained, promoted, and defended more times than he could count. Robert tried to smile. "Hey, Dan." Daniel's eyes widened. "What happened to you?" Robert hesitated. "Life." Daniel shifted nervously, guilt flickering in his gaze. I heard about the accident and the foreclosure. I'm sorry, man." Robert nodded. "Thank you." Daniel lowered his voice. "There's something you should know. Something about why your contracts disappeared." Robert's heartbeat surged. Daniel glanced around, checking if anyone was listening. "Just be careful who you trust," he whispered, "and stay alive. Things aren't what you think." Before Robert could ask more, Daniel hurried off. A secret, a warning, a connection. Something colder than winter settled in Robert's stomach. That night, as Robert settled under the bridge, 3 teenagers approached. "Hey, cripple," one of them stirred. "What's in this bag?" Robert froze. "I don't want any trouble." "Good," the tallest boy said, "'cause trouble's already here." One grabbed the back of Robert's wheelchair and tipped it. Robert hit the ground hard, pain exploding through his spine. They laughed as they kicked his belongings, scattered on the ground. The bread the old woman gave him, the blanket he found in the donation bin, the few cans he collected. "This is what you get from being trash," one spat. Robert didn't scream, didn't fight, didn't curse. He only whispered, "I'm still here." The boys stopped, looked at him, confused by his calm. They left. Robert lay in the cold dirt staring at the stars between the concrete beams. Every breath burned, but he was alive. Sometime past midnight, footsteps approached. Robert braced himself for another attack. Instead, a warm, steady voice said, "Don't move, I've got you." A large man crouched beside him, strong arms, gentle eyes. He lifted Robert back into his wheelchair with surprising ease. The man wore a security jacket. "You're hurt," he said. Robert managed. "I've been worse." The guard studied him for a long moment. "You have the look of someone who's lost everything," he said, "but not someone who's given up." Robert blinked. "How could you know that?" The guard smiled slightly. "Because I've been there." He adjusted Robert's blanket. "My name's Jonas. I patrol this area at night. If you ever need help, you find me, understand?" Robert nodded slowly. Jonas tapped the wheelchair gently. "Good. Don't die. You've still got something left to do." Something left to do. The phrase echoed. The next morning, Robert wheeled himself to a quiet park. The air was sharp. The sky was clear. His body ached in every direction. But his mind was different. Daniel's warning, Jonah's words, the small kindness, the small humiliations. They were pieces of something not yet visible, but forming. Robert whispered to himself, "They took everything from me, but they didn't finish the job." He straightened in his chair. Pain ripped through him, but he couldn't stop. "I'm still here," he said again, stronger this time. The sun broke through the clouds, lightening his face, and in that moment, Robert Hale was no longer just surviving. He was preparing for something he couldn't name yet, but deep down, he knew. The people who destroyed him, the people who bought his contracts, the people who erased his business, were not done with him, and he was not done with them. Every man has a breaking point. Robert Hale had passed his long ago. Now he was entering something different, a place beyond survival, where the truth begins to hunt the man who survived it. The morning after Jonas found him under the bridge, Robert pushed himself toward the city library. not for warmth, not for shelter, but for information. He had been living like a ghost, but Daniel's warning kept echoing. Be careful who you trust and stay alive. Robert rolled into the corner of the library where old newspapers were stacked. He wasn't looking for anything specific, just trying to understand how everything had collapsed so fast. He flipped through articles on construction bids, local contracts, city council meetings. Nothing. Then something. A headline from 18 months earlier. New development group wins multiple city projects. The company name hit like him a fist. Apex Infrastructure Solutions. The same corporation that had moved into town. The same one that had underbid everyone. The same one whose arrival marked the beginning of Robert's downfall. He kept reading. Apex expands to surrounding counties after acquiring several smaller firms. Acquiring, he whispered the word. Acquiring didn't always mean buying. Sometimes it meant destroying competition until the pieces cost nothing. Robert's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the realization that something bigger than bad luck had been eating his life from the inside. Leaving the library, Robert crossed the street slowly. A sleek black SUV rolled past him, tinted windows, polished chrome. But before it fully passed, its window lowered just a few inches. A pair of eyes watched him, cold, calculating, familiar. Robert froze. He didn't know the man's name, but he had seen him once, months before everything collapsed, at a city council meeting, standing behind one of the representatives, whispering into his ear. The window slid up again. The SUV pulled away. Whoever he was, he recognized Robert, and he wasn't surprised to see him alive. That was what frightened Robert the most. That night, Jonas found Robert near the overpass again, this time before he settled down. You look like a man chasing ghosts, Jonas said. I saw someone today, Robert replied. Someone who knew me, someone who shouldn't. Jonas crouched beside him. Describe him. Robert did. Jonas' expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. You need to stay away from anyone connected to that circle. What circle? Jonas looked around before answering. The people who pull strings in this city, the ones who buy what they want and crush what they don't. Robert felt his pulse climb. You know something. Jonas nodded once. I know enough to say this. Your fall wasn't an accident. The wall tilted slightly. Robert gripped the arm of his chair. Then why me? Because, Jonas said quietly, you were in the way. The next morning, Jonas wasn't on patrol. Hours passed, no sign of him. By evening, Robert began to worry. He moved around the blocks Jonas usually patrolled. Nothing. Just as he reached the alley behind the bakery, something caught his eye. A brown paper bag leaning against the wall. Clean, dry, placed carefully. Robert rolled closer. His name was written on it. Inside were a sandwich, a bottle of water, and a folded note. The handwriting was sharp, quick. Do not stay under the bridge tonight, and do not go near the bus station. J. Robert's heart tightened. This wasn't kindness. This was a warning. Something was happening, and he was suddenly in danger. Robert decided to check anyway. He moved slowly toward the underpass, staying close to the shadows. His wheels made almost no sound. As he approached, he heard voices. 3 men, not teenagers, adults, serious voices, looking for someone. He sleeps here most nights. Wheelchair guy? Yeah, the one here. You sure it's tonight? Orders came down fast. We just do what we're paid for. Robert stopped breathing. Paid for. Someone had sent them. He backed away silently, inch by inch, until he was out of sight. Then he turned and pushed himself as fast as his body allowed. Every bump sent pain through his spine, but he didn't stop. He understood one thing clearly now. Whoever had destroyed his life wanted the job finished. Robert needed a place to hide, a place nobody would look. On the edge of the industrial district sat a factory that had closed years ago, a brick building with broken windows and a rusted sign. He slipped inside through a side door, hanging crooked on its hinges. The air was cold, dust floated like frozen fog. He positioned himself behind a stack of old pallets, covered himself with an abandoned trap, and listened, not for safety, for footsteps. In the corner of the factory, filling cabinets lay taped over, papers spilled across the floor. Most were water damaged, some moldy, but one half-burned sheet caught Robert's eye. He picked it up carefully. Across the top, in faded ink, Apex Infrastructure Solutions internal correspondence. His chest tightened. The page was ripped across the middle. The visible text read, "Acquisition stage complete. Local contractors eliminated through coordinated bid reconstructing. Ensure Hale Construction refusal to assistance to force accelerated collapse. Final step. Foreclosure triggers control of Cedar Street property." The words blurred for a moment as Robert stared. His hands shook. This wasn't a theory. This wasn't a coincidence. This was engineered, planned, executed. They had taken his contracts, taken his business, taken his home on purpose. There were more lines at the bottom, but they were burned away. Robert closed his eyes. For the first time since the accident, something fierce rose inside him. Not rage, purpose. As dawn cracked through the broken windows, footsteps echoed through the building. Robert tensed. A figure appeared at the far end. Broad shoulders, slow steps, careful eyes. Jonas. He approached without surprise. "You found the place," he said quietly. "You left the bag," Robert replied. Jonas nodded. "They were sent for you." "Why?" Jonas leaned on a steel beam. "You ever wonder why a corporation would target a small-town contractor with a clean reputation?" Robert didn't answer. Jonas continued, "Because you stood in the way of something they wanted, a land purchase, a multi-state deal, and you won't sell your signature." Robert stared. "When did I refuse?" Jonas looked at him steadily. 6 years ago." Robert searched his memory. A city meeting, a man with a folder, a handshake he didn't accept. He had forgotten it. They hadn't. Jonas stepped closer. "They don't look like men they can't buy, so they break them." Robert felt the world sharpen, like a lens tightening into focus. "Help me," he said, not as a plea, as a statement. Jonas nodded once. "I already am." Jonas pulled something from his jacket. A cheap prepaid phone. "You're going to need this," he said. "For what?" "To contact someone who knows what Apex really is. Someone who started digging long before you lost your house." Robert swallowed. "Why me?" Jonas' eyes softened. "Because, Robert, you're the only one they didn't expect to survive." He placed the phone in Robert's hand. "When you're ready," Jonas said, "call the number saved under R. Don't ask who it is. Don't stay where you are. Just listen." Robert nodded, not because he trusted everything yet, but because he had no choice except to rise, slowly, methodically, with purpose. For the first time since losing everything, he wasn't drifting. He was moving toward truth, toward the people who tried to erase him, toward a fight he hadn't asked for, but would finish. A man with nothing to lose is one they feared the most. At Apex Infrastructure, the machine that crushed Robert Hale's life was about to learn that he was no longer hiding. He was hunting. The prepaid phone Jonas gave him was cheap and scratched, the kind sold in gas stations and pawn shops, but it felt heavier than any phone Robert had ever held. One name was saved inside R. No full name, no details, just a single initial. Robert rolled deeper into the abandoned factory, settling behind a column where early sunlight couldn't reach him. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with coiled determination. He pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a quiet voice answered, "You're alive." Robert froze. It was a woman's voice, low, controlled, not surprised, relieved. "Who is this?" Robert asked. "Someone who warned you years ago," she replied. "You just didn't know you were being warmed." Robert's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "You signed a refusal," she said. "A refusal that cost Apex millions. They don't forgive that." Robert gripped the phone. "Who are you?" A long pause. "I can't say my name. They're still watching me, but I have documents you'll need. Proof of everything they did to you and to others." Others. The world felt like a punch. Robert had always assumed he was unlucky. Not targeted, not one of many. "I want the truth," he said. "You'll get it," she replied, "but you'll have to move. You can't stay where you are. They've put eyes on your last known locations." Robert swallowed. "Tell me where to go." "I'll send an address. Don't speak to anyone. Don't trust anyone except Jonas and Robert." "Yes. If they know you're digging, they won't try to ruin you again." Her voice sharpened into something cold. "They'll try to erase you." The line went dead. A text buzzed in seconds. "453 Rivergate, basement door, 3 p.m. Come alone." Robert tucked the phone away and maneuvered his wheelchair through the factory's side exit. He moved slowly, watching every passing car, every pedestrian who seemed to glance too long. Halfway down the block, he noticed him, a man in a gray jacket, standing across the street, hands in pockets, head tilted slightly in Robert's direction. He wasn't pretending to be casual. He wasn't hiding. He was waiting. Robert kept rolling as if he hadn't noticed. The man didn't move right away, but as soon as Robert turned the corner, footsteps followed, measured, deliberate, following him. Robert's heartbeat hammered. He needed to disappear. He pushed through the alley behind the butcher shop, cutting between dumpsters, weaving around trash cans. The footsteps quickened. Robert reached a narrow metal gate and shoved it open with his shoulder. The gate squealed and he slipped through. He didn't stop until he reached the far sidewalk. He looked back. The man in the gray jacket stood behind the gate, watching, not chasing, just observing, like he wanted Robert to know, "We see you. We're close." At noon, Robert reached a small public park, the kind with rusted benches and swings missing half their chains. It was empty, quiet. The prepaid phone buzzed again. A message from Jonas. "Do not go to the bridge. They searched it. Move carefully." Robert typed back, "I'm meeting R today." A moment passed, then Jonas replied, "Good, but understand, people have died for less than what you're about to learn." Robert stared at the screen. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't backing down. He wasn't the man who cried in a motel bed anymore. He had already lost everything that could be taken. Now he was taking something back. Rivergate Avenue was a stretch of forgotten industrial buildings, wedged between a highway and the riverbank. Most were abandoned or half-burned. 453 was not different. Broken windows, graffiti, a metal roll-up door rusted shut. Robert rolled to the side where a smaller basement door sat beneath sagging awning. 3 p.m., he knocked. A slit in the door slid open from the inside. 2 eyes, sharp, exhausted, female, looked out. "You're early," she said. "You're cautious," he replied. The door opened just enough for him to slip through. The basement was dimly lit, filled with filing cabinets, old monitors, stacks of printed documents, and a single portable heater humming in the corner. The woman locked the door behind them. She was younger than Robert expected. Early 30s maybe, but her face held years of stress. "I can't stay long," she said. "They monitored the area, but you need to see this." She pulled a binder from a locked cabinet and placed it in Robert's lap. Across the front, Apex Internal, Confidential. "You were targeted long before the accident," she said, sitting across from him. Your refusal to sign the Cedar Street rezoning blocked the multi-million-dollar pipeline expansion. Robert clenched his jaw. Then why destroy my entire life? Because you didn't play the game, she said, and the people at the top don't tolerate defiance. She flipped open the binder. Page after page contained leaked emails, meeting memos, payment logs, contract manipulation strategies, lists of obstruction candidates. Robert scanned them, his breath shaken. There it was, his name, highlighted, underlined, tagged, non-compliant asset, remove. He felt his throat tighten. I was never an asset, he whispered. No, she said softly. You were a threat. She flipped to another section. Look at the date, she said. Robert did. It was the date of the accident, the steel beams, the snap, the pain, the wheelchair. What am I looking at? Robert asked. Shift assignments, she said.